Welcome to this explainer. We're diving straight into the incredible evolution of Indian architecture today. We're going to discover how shifting empires, diverse climates, and incredibly skilled local craftsmen created this brilliant living dialogue in stone. You see, it's a story not just of grand monuments, but of continuous cultural fusion.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the foundations of Indian architecture, move into Vastu and Mauryan innovations, explore the Mughal and Rajput fusion, decode some arches and brackets, and wrap up with the colonial bungalow evolution.
Just to give you a sense of scale, we're spanning literally thousands of years here, from prehistoric rock art in caves all the way to 19th century colonial bungalows. But as we make this massive jump across history, keep an eye out for a recurring theme: adaptation. Indian architecture is entirely defined by its ability to cross-pollinate ideas.
Section 1. Foundations of Indian Architecture. Carving the Past. Our story actually kicks off in natural caves. Early humans left their very first architectural marks here, using minerals and iron oxide to paint their stories in vibrant red and white pigments. They were essentially turning basic rock shelters into the region's earliest curated spaces. Then, if we fast forward to the Indus Valley Civilization around 2500 BCE, we see this absolutely massive leap. We go from painted caves straight to highly sophisticated urban planning. They laid out streets in strict grid patterns, divided their cities into citadels and lower towns, and engineered these mind-blowing underground drainage systems using standardized baked bricks, a total marvel of early civil engineering. Moving on to Section 2, Vastu and Mauryan innovations, geometry and stone.
So how exactly did those early ideas of spatial organization evolve into sacred and monumental architecture? Well, it all comes down to the Vastu Purush Mandala. Think of this square grid as a cosmic blueprint. It literally bridged human dwellings with solar movements and the Earth's magnetic field. This grid became the ultimate foundation for temples, cities, and homes, showing us just how deeply rooted early Indian architecture was in astronomy and the natural sciences. Then, by the 3rd century BCE, the Mauryan Empire completely changed the game. They ditched wood and sun-dried bricks and revived stone art to build these massive, monumental structures. A perfect example of this sheer scale is the grand 80-pillared hall discovered at Kumhar, built entirely out of highly polished stone.
Now, since the Mauryan Empire reached all the way into Afghanistan, there was definitely a Persian influence going on, but the Mauryans totally made the style their own. Persian pillars were segmented, fluted, and celebrated military conquests. Mauryan pillars, on the other hand, incredibly smooth, carved from a single monolithic piece of stone, standing completely independent of other buildings, and focused on championing Buddhist values.
All right, Section 3, Mughal and Rajput fusion, the craftsman's dialogue. This is where things get really fascinating. When we zoom in on the 16th to 18th centuries, Mughal and Rajput architectural styles look pretty different at first glance. Mughal palaces were all about perfect symmetry, Persian decorative forms, and separate pavilions inside a flat, fortified compound. Rajput guard palaces, though, grew organically. They had irregular massing, leaned heavily into local folk art, and were built continuously right into the sides of steep hills. But here is the real kicker. Right from the get-go, Indo-Islamic patrons relied heavily on local Hindu artisan guilds. Emperor Babur himself wrote about using nearly 1,500 local stonecutters every single day. Having that shared workforce naturally sparked a massive dynamic exchange of architectural ideas between these different kingdoms.
Since these highly skilled craftsmen were constantly moving back and forth between Mughal and Rajput royal patrons, structural ideas crossed over all the time. Take the Bengal-Dar roof, for instance. It was originally derived from the humble, curved bamboo huts of Bengal, but this shape was seamlessly adapted into both grand Rajput palaces and majestic Mughal pavilions. Talk about a perfect cultural fusion.
That brings us to Section 4, Decoding Arches and Brackets, a Shared Vocabulary.
Let's zoom in on the specific structural details of this fusion. You see, the Mughals didn't just import Persian arches, they actively incorporated traditional Hindu trabeate, meaning post and lintel elements, right into their grand buildings. Deep projecting eaves, known as chedjas, supported by elaborately carved 2- or 3-tier corbel brackets, quickly became absolute defining features of Mughal architecture.
And this leads us to a really fascinating question. When we look at a beautiful multi-scallop cusped arch, like the ones gracing the magnificent Taj Mahal, we usually just assume it's a purely Mughal invention brought over from Persia. But is it really?
Well, it turns out that's a bit of a myth. Earlier Hindu and pre-Mughal craftsmen were actually experimenting with this scalloped form centuries before the Mughals perfected it. We see early flying cusped arches at the Khajuraho temple around 1000 AD, and later in Ajmer around 1200 AD. That is way before Shah Jahan brought them to their grand maturity in the 17th century.
Here's the real architectural secret behind all this. Early local artisans didn't achieve this beautiful shape by using a true arch made of curved, wedge-shaped stones. Nope, they cleverly carved the scalloped design straight into vertical stone slabs, acting as corbelled brackets. So while it looked exactly like an arch, structurally it was a traditional Hindu bracket system. It is literally the ultimate proof of deep structural fusion between these two cultures.
Finally, Section 5, the colonial bungalow evolution, adapting the past.
Let's pull back out and look at how these deep-rooted principles of adaptation and climate control survived right into the 19th and 20th centuries. The British colonial bungalow might look foreign to us now, but its name and its initial layout are actually lifted straight from local vernacular architecture. It comes from the bangla, a traditional thatched hut from Bengal. It's just another instance of an incoming culture relying entirely on local forms to survive.
As the bungalow style spread across the subcontinent, it kept that great Indian tradition of local adaptation alive, shifting its shape to match specific climates and cultures. In Calcutta, steep sloping roofs were added to fight off heavy monsoon rains. Down in South India, they brought in inner courtyards to handle the humidity, plus this quirky wooden fretwork playfully called monkey tops. Meanwhile, Delhi was embracing neoclassical columns, and Mumbai integrated Art Deco.
And you know, just like the Indus Valley planners and Vastu scholars thousands of years before them, the architects of these colonial bungalows totally mastered passive climate control. They wrapped core rooms in deep verandas, built thick walls with extremely high ceilings to trap heat, and drew out hot air using ventilators while cooling incoming breezes with aromatic kuss curtains. These weren't just decorative choices, they were highly engineered survival tools for the intense Indian summer.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? From ancient painted caves to incredibly precise gridded ancient cities. From that brilliant structural fusion of Mughal and Rajput brackets to the deep porches of colonial bungalows, architecture in India has never been just a static timeline of conquering empires. It is a continuous, living, breathing dialogue between local craftsmen, adapting materials, and shifting climates.
We'll leave it there for today, but it really does make you wonder, right? If the stones of your own home could speak, what cultural fusions and ancient techniques would they reveal? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep looking closely at the walls around you.